everybody. Let me be the first to welcome you to our very first episode of Troublemakers for Justice. Today's episode, we have a good topic for you. We're going to settle it. Oh! I'm your host, Amari.
And I'm your host, Enehi.
And today, we have a very interesting topic for you guys. Mm-hmm. Reverse racism. We're going to settle it right here, right now.
Ding, ding, ding.
We're going to be the first to welcome our guest speaker, Elijah.
Yo. Happy to be here.
Mm-hmm. Elijah, thank you so much for agreeing to come to this. First, I'm very curious as to, when you first heard of the topic, what were your first thoughts? And, what were you expecting?
I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest. I think it's a difficult topic, but I think it's a relevant one, you know? Just with what's going on in the US today, a lot of, I would say white people are very nervous about the discussions around race, and the topic of white guilt comes up a lot when people are thinking about what should be taught in schools and what shouldn't be. And so, yeah, I didn't really know what I would say. I don't really think I've had any experiences really with reverse racism. But I think as a topic, is it a myth? Is there some relevancy to it? What, can or I don't know should be done to make us all more comfortable talking about the issues of race? I think that's all relevant, and I'd be excited to talk about it. I mean, overall, I was just flattered that you guys thought that my opinion was important and that you wanted to have me on.
Of course.
I got to be a part of such an amazing and popular podcast.
We have special guest, Uapii.
So reverse racism, let's not pretend. It's a very huge issue in the community. We go to a liberal arts school. There's white people here.
A lot of white people here.
Yeah.
A lot of white people here.
And it's sometimes people's feelings get hurt by some of the things that go on in this community. BSU, what is that? What do you think
about reverse racism? The first thing that comes to mind is the fact, or whenever groups on campus, I guess all the cultural groups on campus, they're not allowed to say that it's specifically for one type of group, because that means you'll exclude all the other groups. And I think, at least with reverse racism, it seems like something that people they play that card when it suits them, and it doesn't apply to all situations.
That's the truth. Yeah.
So the Oxford English Dictionary defined reverse racism as a prejudice or antagonism directed towards a majority or dominant ethnic group, and it's perceived discrimination by or in favor of a minority or oppressed ethnic group. Can you define what reverse racism means to you and kind of explain how you think it differs from traditional understandings of racism?
So in my head, how I understand racism is that you have, I guess, it's prejudice towards a particular group but it's based on the I guess the premise or the thought that your group is superior or more significant than other groups. So in my head, racism only works because when I read that definition, it only works one way. It only works that white people can be racist towards other groups, and it can't work the other way around. Because historically, as far as I'm concerned, at least from me, historically, I don't think other racial groups or ethnic groups think of themselves as being superior to the white people or Caucasians. Because historically, they've been pushed down to a point where, if anything, at least from my perspective, if anything, all I want is just to be on equal playing terms. It's not I don't think of myself as being more significant. So reverse racism is something that it's kind of hard to think about, because I'm I don't know how it could work, because now it doesn't make sense, because it's based on that whole idea that one racial group being wholeheartedly believing that they are superior and more significant than others. So it doesn't feel, it feels weird when it's reversed.
Yeah, I guess my definition, my idea was pretty simple. That would just be any sort of I guess, oppression or discrimination from a minority against a majority. Yeah, like I guess that's what it means to me. What was the second part of the question?
Sorry. Can you explain how you think it differs from traditional understandings of racism?
I would say that traditionally with racism, there's like a historical sense of oppression behind it. It's people in power who are like oppressing or discriminating against those who are not. And I guess reverse racism would just be like a purely social thing where there's not exactly some sort of history behind it as much as it's a feeling in the moment, and reverse racism, it comes from the history of just, I guess normal racism where people are feeling, I guess, nervous that people who are historically without power are beginning to kind of get it back.
Yeah. I'm very curious as to how you would define reverse racism, Amari.
Me?
Yeah.
I think from my understanding, like reading of articles, it makes it seem like how this definition is set up, like it's a prejudice against a minority group that thinks from a majority group.
Prejudice.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between prejudice and racism, would you say? Like in terms of like structure, the way it's set up, or do you think it's like kind of in the same family?
I think people confuse the terms or mix the terms of prejudice and racism often together. I think it's interesting how a lot of people don't know the exact definitions of each word.
How would you like differentiate the two?
For me, my understanding of what I've been taught growing up is like prejudice is an opinion or a thought, and like having certain stereotypes against another race. But racism is when you take those stereotypes and put it in action against another race. And racism also has to do with, like you were saying, a certain group thinking that they are on a higher pedestal than any other group. And I don't think for like people of color we are thinking in our thoughts that we're on a higher pedestal than anybody else in this country. But when it comes to the white race, they're like our way or the highway type of thing.
And I think it's very interesting too when people define racism like based on individual terms, when it's also systemic. So essentially when a white person's feelings are hurt, then they say, oh, now you've been racist to me, when that's not necessarily what racism is. It's what prejudice is, yes, I agree, but like for racism to succeed, just like your definition at the beginning, it needs like structures in place and like people at the top of those structures in real life, not just in their heads, if that makes sense.
So it's sort of like, or at least what I mean, sort of like the difference is like the one is like essentially just like the thoughts that you have, and the other one is like enacting those thoughts and like putting like systems in place to like make sure that those thoughts are like turned into some kind of hierarchy or system.
Yeah, because there's a whole thing where people think that what's it called, the thing where you get accepted into school more, is it affirmative
action? That's
affirmative action.
That's the first thing that I thought about when I was thinking of, or at least when I was thinking of reverse racism, and how it was that how affirmative action sort of came to like disappear was because of there was that I think it was that one Asian student that said like I don't know if he had an issue with affirmative action and said that like he was, because he had like he had like tops, he got into like a lot of different schools, but like he wasn't being accepted, and he blamed it on affirmative action, saying like no, it's because affirmative action is sort of like barring him from being accepted into like all of those top schools type of things, but like that's not, in that case he sort of like he went and twisted what affirmative action actually does.
Yeah,
I feel like going off of affirmative action, for me the article that we read, and I'm gonna drop the link somewhere in the bio, but I think what came to my mind after reading that was like this man is like against affirmative action plans in the sense of like he was literally like I'm a white man and I'm higher educated than any of these minorities, but I don't get a spot, even though there's a set number of spots to make sure that minorities get into med school or this specific med school. Like, okay, sir, yeah, like, yeah.
like at that point, apply somewhere else.
Literally.
Because you literally, at that point,
else.
you are a white man. You are literally like at the top of the social hierarchy, racial hierarchy in the US. You can go anywhere, and this one school said no to you solely because they have. But the thing is, like with that article, the thing that also like annoyed me was like a racial quota.
Yes.
That thing also like annoyed me solely because, or at least, it's like it comes back to that argument of like, that I at least I've had, and like I know some other people have had, like it comes back to the argument of like, did I actually get this job or this position because of my credentials or solely to fit their quota because I'm black? So that's the thing. But I don't know. It's always that one is a two-way street because you can either think of like, oh, you can go down the thought pattern of saying, oh, I only got this job because I'm black, or you can think of it in a positive way, like, hey, because I'm black, I now have this opportunity, type of thing. But that's also what I was thinking about.
So I'm curious to think or to ask you, what role do you think privilege plays in like reverse racism?
I think privilege has a big role. Not to have any sort of mindset that I hate when people talk about, although I don't really hear that often, like racism is gone, racism is defeated in this country. That's not true, but I tend to think that nowadays, at least with the path that it takes to get into college specifically, that class has a lot more to do with it, right? It's the amount of money that you have, the amount of whether you have, a safe home environment to go back to, access to tutors, access to, extra SAT practice, because that costs money, which is ridiculous in my opinion, to get access to those tests. And that stuff has a lot more to do with how much money you have than the color of your skin. And I think that while still having some sort of ability to recognize a person's individual struggle, which is associated with race, that does change your path in life, I think that, it's still much more like, you get a much greater advantage from being rich than you do being white.
And in the US, I feel like it's just quite stark the way the disparities in income is concentrated in minority communities, and that happen to be black and brown, and that just trickles its way down into education and other aspects, which is why I really value the systemic definition of racism, as it's based on discrimination that comes with power, which, for people who argue on reverse racism, I think there really is a certain privilege there because it kind of ignores the power that systemic racism has in order for it to work. And it's just something like to consider as well, like in thinking about college decisions, like what happened in the article, the 84 versus 15 spots. It's like, I wonder if that came up in the court case as well, when I think about it. But it's just very interesting.
I mean, I feel like it probably did come up in the court case, but like as you're saying, when racism is so embedded in the system in which you're taking the case to, it's like you're fighting against a brick wall.
All right.
But now it's time for me to question Enehi.
Okay. All right.
This is
that's in the script.
Yeah. This is quick fire myth or fact.
Okay.
Just specifically for you. People of color don't have it that bad in comparison to the white race. Myth or fact?
That's a myth.
Assumptions and stereotypes about white people that exist are considered racial prejudice, not racism.
I think that's a fact. Yeah.
See, 2 for 2. Look at our host. People of color aren't the only ones who are put at disadvantage or targeted because of their race.
People of color? In the U.S.,
Yeah.
people of color are not the only ones
Who are put at
targeted.
a disadvantage or targeted because of their race.
Honestly speaking, I would not 100% place that as myth and fact. I think it's possible for majority groups to be targeted and discriminated because of their race. I would just define that as racial prejudice, not racism. That's
Look at you go.
it's a fifth.
Okay, last one. Reverse racism attempts to ignore the power dynamic between the individuals or groups involved.
Yes, fact. That's a fact.
I'll give you your third one.
Okay.
Your what is it?
Do I get to do that for you too?
No.
Can
Maybe-
I? No,
maybe
actually.
next
New segment.
Maybe next
New
episode.
segment. ChatGPT wants to know.
Oh,
ChatGPT.
Let's hear it then.
Reverse
This is important.
racism. If reverse racism were a flavor of ice cream, what would it taste like and why?
what would it taste like? It wouldn't taste like chocolate. I don't know.
Why?
Let me think. Yeah, I don't know. I say
This is great.
like bittersweet vanilla.
Bittersweet vanilla.
Yeah, like upset vanilla.
Okay. Upset vanilla.
Angry
Mint
vanilla, yeah.
chocolate
I like
chip.
that.
So-
Can
salt-
you put like
no,
a graphic?
listen to this. Yeah. Salty,
Upset vanilla.
salty vanilla. would
Salty
work too.
vanilla.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That was all my
Thanks,
questions.
ChatGPT.
What would you name? What ice cream flavor would you give me?
I think there's nothing that beats salty vanilla, honestly.
He ate with that one.
He ate with that.
So, after this discussion, tell me, Uapii. Yeah. Is reverse racism a legit concern, or is that a myth?
It's a myth. It's an absolute lie.
Oh.
But it's an absolute. I swear, it's a lie. It's an elaborate ruse. I use those words in my life, but it's an elaborate ruse to, I guess, for white people to maintain their status of privilege and like superiority. But I will say that it is a concern still. As much as it's a lie, it's a concerning lie, and it's something that people should really need to figure out how to deal with it, because we can't just have white people deciding they're going to sue any and all institutions based on the fact that they weren't good enough to get in.
And that's so embarrassing too.
It is.
That's embarrassing for the institution.
Yeah.
And that was what I was thinking. People need to institutions must equip themselves against white people's stupidity.
Yeah.
White people's stupidity and their bruised egos.
Ugh, yeah.
Because clearly, a white man with a bruised ego will go to many lengths to ensure that his status as being a white man, a superior white man, is maintained. But it's an absolute lie, and I'll say this now. It's an absolute lie.
Alright, Elijah. The last question of the show.
Alright, you ready?
Is reverse racism a legit concern, or is it a myth?
It's definitely not a legit concern. I mean, in a world of so many legit concerns, like racism against white people is so low on my list. To be completely honest, I wouldn't say it's a myth because people are bringing it up and they're upset about it, and I'm sure somewhere that there's an example of racism and prejudice against a minority group. Is it widespread? Absolutely not. Is it impactful enough to be at the forefront of any sort of national conversation or to have any sort of policy implemented against it? No. We got other shit to worry about, to be real. So,
Well, you've heard it here, folks.
yeah.
You heard it here.
Stop taking this shit to court.
Chill out.
Chill the fuck.
Big bleeps in the middle. We can't cuss on this. Joe
This
Capone
podcast is not Earlham sponsored. It is actually.
And folks, that is it for this episode.
Bye.
We'll see you on the next episode of
Sick.
Troublemakers for Justice.
Rap. That's a rap.